All right, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to create some kind of simple scoreboard. Um, so I already have a game that does something. You probably should make some sort of interaction before you bother creating a score because otherwise you're going to be pretty bored. So I have collisions working. These circles collide with each other and they collide with this blue dude, and the blue dude falls down um, whenever the circle hits it. So that's kind of all it does. All right, so I'm going to make a new part of my game for the scoreboard. You could do this in HTML. I'm going to just use the fill text method. Um, you could also, if you like updating HTML, you could do that. It would be the same concept. So um, I'll make a display score function, um, and then I'll add that as a drawing. You could do this internally if you want. All I need to do is just fill text. So now, of course, I also need a score. So I'll let the score equal 0. And the score here can just be the score and then an X and a Y. And then you can also add a font if you want. 45 pixel Futura. And you could also make a color if you like. And I think it's centered by default, so like, yeah, you can see that that font's leaving the screen, so I'll move it down a little bit. All right, and if you wanted to say more, you could use a template string instead of just doing the score. So I could make it say like current score. This is with those backticks. And then the $ squiggles let you insert stuff into the backticks. So now it'll say current score and then insert the value of score there. All right, so now I have successfully displayed a variable. And that was really very simple. Just I created a variable and I displayed it. One note about my game, it draws the things in order. So if I want the score to be on top, I can just put that as the last thing that gets added. And now the score will go over the other things instead of under them. Maybe you like them under it. That's up to you. Oh, it looks like I had a bug in my collision code. There we go. All right, lovely. Okay, so now I'm displaying a score. And now I guess your next question is, how would you update it? So there's got to be some event at which you update the score. So I'm going to go down to my code for my player inside of make player. And I'll show you how that currently works. So currently, whenever it collides with a circle, its Y position gets knocked down 10. So I guess I don't know how this game works, but let's suppose that you were trying to hit the circle or something. I could do something like score plus equals 1. And there we see the scores going up. Now you probably saw a little problem right away, which is that the collision keeps happening. So if you keep making the score go up while the collision's happening, then your score will depend on like the frame rate of the game. So you probably want to figure out a way to make the collision only happen once. So you've got a few different options for that. You could look at the actual physics of the game. You could create some kind of state. You could create a is colliding variable that checks if it's colliding, and if it's so only does sort of once per collision. So let me try that approach just to show you how that would work. Here's my sprite. Um, and I currently don't have, I'll make a new variable. So I can make a new variable called isColliding, and it's equal to false, right? So now I'm going to check here. I'll make a new variable when I check for the collisions, colliding this time. So then I check each circle and I say, do they collide? If they collide, I'll say colliding this time equals true. All right. So now I have two states. I know, is it already colliding? And is it colliding this time, right? So is colliding is at the player scope. Is colliding this time is inside of the callback. So now I'm going to say if colliding this time and not is colliding, score plus equals 1. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll set is colliding equal to colliding this time. So in theory, what that should do is make it so that the circle only gets one collision. Now, the way this movement works, it's still kind of bouncy because the sprite, oh, there was a good example though. He moved through the ball and it only went up one. But when he bounces and hits him each time, then it's kind of not as smooth. But that's a pretty good solution. And again, depending on the physics, that might do it. You could also set a timer if you wanted to, so that, you know, after a certain amount of time went by, you were eligible to get a new score. That'd be another way. So there, that's working 46, 47. The other thing we could do is we could look at the collision physics themselves, and instead of just knocking the sprite down by 10, we could knock the sprite down by some more relevant amount. So for example, I could say 10 plus circle Vy. So that would then depend on the speed of the circle. Yeah, so when the circle hits it hard, it goes further. So that's another way to handle it. Of course, the 10 then doesn't quite move it right. So I'm going to just change this to the circle Vy. So that means it'll move as much as the circle would move in 1 second, right? I could also make it bounce by the circle Vx. This isn't precise physics, but it means that the sprite will get bounced however much that circle would move in a second. So it's going to move it away from the circle, boom, very quickly. And therefore the score won't keep going up over and over again. So that's another way to handle it. Of course, now my sprite's capable of moving up, and I didn't have code that handled him moving up. So here, I'll make him move around. If sprite.y is less than 0, now he'll move around the thing. Alrighty, so there you go. That's a simple way to handle score. Really, all you need to do is create a variable for the score, and then draw that onto the screen with this display score. And then you just need to think through, especially when you have something that happens in your draw. So this is in the add drawing callback is where I'm checking for the score. Remember, that runs 60 times a second, so it's really easy to make the score go up by like 1,000 if you don't create some extra bit of state, like this colliding this time, and then I just check so that it only happens once per collision, right? So that's a nice way to think about it. Actually, let me just show you how that works. If I get rid of the movement entirely, I'll make it so the sprite doesn't move when it hits the circle. So now you can see more cleanly with this colliding this time code. I'm not getting enough circles. I better add some more circles, but we got one. Create some more circles. right, more circles now. So we're seeing the score does not go up as quickly. It's going to go up 3, even though the circle's moving through it, right? So they're 4, 6. And let me just show you what that would look like if I didn't bother with this. So if instead of updating the score only if it's colliding this time, if I just said here, every time there's a collision, make the score go up by 1, the score would go up by like 100 each time. And again, that would be different depending on how fast the computer was that you were running on. So it would depend on the frame rate of the game. So obviously you don't want your score to depend on the game's frame rate. That's really bad. So that's why I took the extra step of saying, am I already colliding? If so, I'm not allowed to collide a second time. And I probably needed something similar in my collision code to make these things not jitter. That's a pretty common kind of error you can have in collision code that I'd have to look through and see what I was doing. All right, there we go.